The mid to late 80s saw a massive boom period for the WWF, due in large part to the rock and roll wrestling connection with names like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper, the introduction of WrestleMania, and the peak of their biggest star, Hulk Hogan, who held the company's top belt a record 5 times before the whiff of the steroid scandal saw a shift in philosophy. During that time, Hogan held the belt for an amazing total of 2,157 days. That works out at just under 6 years as champion. However, while the Hogan whirlwind of success made himself and the company very rich, there were many superstars who missed out on realising their potential with the company. There were countless wrestlers who, as a result of WWF's decision-making, whether it was management or backstage politics, which given Hogan's past comes into play a lot, never got to hold the top belt. A shame for some, and criminal for others. Therefore, here are 10 Hulkamania Era Wrestlers who should have held the WWF title. Number 10. Roddy Piper. Seen by many as one of the key figures in WWF's rise in the mid-80s, one of the best talkers and innovators in the sport's history, and universally acclaimed as one of the greatest heels in wrestling, and soon after, one of its biggest fan favourites, Roddy Piper is a legend at the Squared Circle. Piper made his name on the West Coast and in the Carolinas, where he was praised for his amazing promo work. This continued when he arrived in the WWF, as his regular segment, Piper's Pit, was the scene of some of the most famous moments of the period, including his altercation with Jimmy Snuka, where Piper cracked a coconut over Snuka's head, and being the scene at the start of the feud between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, which led to their match at WrestleMania 3. His initial run with the company also propelled WWF into the stratosphere with a rock and wrestling connection, of which Piper was at the forefront as part of the main event of WrestleMania 1, and his program with Hogan led him to be named Heel of the Year 2 years running. Yet despite this, he was never given the chance to hold the company's top prize. Following a short absence, Piper returned as a mega babyface, and legions of fans took him to their hearts due to his ability and connection with them, which would eventually lead to his induction into the WWE Hall of Fame. And despite only holding 1 Intercontinental and 1 Tag title in his time, Piper will always be seen as one of the greatest in company history. Number 9. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. Many people will only know Paul Orndorff as the man Hulk Hogan pinned in the main event tag match at WrestleMania 1. In actuality, Mr. Wonderful was a major star of the early 80s, becoming a 4-time National Heavyweight Champion with Georgia Championship Wrestling, before arriving in the WWF in 1983. Initially aligning with Roddy Piper, Orndorff was one of the first men to challenge Hogan for his newly won WWF title. Following said WrestleMania match, Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton attacked Orndorff at Saturday Night Main Event, only for him to return later in the evening to aid Hogan against the duo who had attacked him. Hogan and Orndorff became regular tag partners for almost a year, until tensions began to grow as several heels tried to get into Orndorff's skin regarding his relationship with Hogan, referring to him as Hulk Jr. It eventually came to a head after the two were victorious in a tag match, as Orndorff clotheslined Hogan out of nowhere before hitting the champion with a piledriver. What followed next was a half-year-long feud that's remembered as one of the biggest and most profitable in wrestling history, winning Feud of the Year in 1986. This feud included the famous outdoor match in Toronto, which drew 76,000 fans, and the steel cage match where both men escaped at the same time. However, Hogan was eventually victorious, and Orndorff then left TV to recover from a serious arm injury he suffered during the feud, which would eventually lead him to semi-retire a year later. Number 8. The Junkyard Dog. Sylvester Ritter, or the Junkyard Dog to you and me, was one of the biggest wrestling stars of the 1980s, making his name in Mid-South wrestling. Initially a jobber with a dog collar around his neck pushing a shopping cart full of junk to the ring, the fans grew to love him as he became the biggest babyface of the promotion. His feud with Michael P.S. Hayes of the Fabulous Freebirds drew national attention, as the dog was kayfabe blinded by Hayes' hair cream, leaving the dog to exclaim that he would never see his newborn daughter as a result, which caused so much heat in the days where kayfabe was guarded with wrestlers' lives that the Freebirds required police escorts in and out of arenas. Other feuds with Ted DiBiase, King Kong Bundy, and protege Butch Reed made JYD a 4-time heavyweight champion with the promotion, before he moved to the WWF in 1984. Most of his gimmick remained the same, and after winning the Wrestling Classic in 1985, last defeating Randy Savage, a big push was expected. Unfortunately, the dog was never used fully despite his popularity with the fans. Then again, since he was competing for the top babyface spot with Hulk Hogan at the time, he was never likely to succeed. JYD left the WWF in 1988 for WCW, and continued to work around the United States until his untimely death from a car accident in 1998. Number 7. Jake the Snake Roberts. One of the biggest fan favourites of this time, Jake Roberts was seen as one of the most intense, intelligent, and dark characters the WWF ever had. His use of psychology in the ring and his promos left opponents and fans uncomfortable and intrigued at the same time. After time and success in promotions such as Stampede, World Class, and Mid-South, Roberts arrived in the WWF in 1986 and immediately made headlines with his feud with Ricky Steamboat, in which he DDT'd the Dragon on the concrete floor in front of his wife before placing his Snake Damien on top of his prone adversary. Despite this extreme heel act, Roberts would slowly become a fan favourite, much to the annoyance of management. After a surprise show of support for the Snake in a match against babyface Randy Savage over the Intercontinental Championship, plans were afoot to pair Roberts against the company's top babyface Hulk Hogan, resulting in a feud over the WWF title. During an episode of Roberts' talk segment, The Snake Bit, Jake DDT'd Hogan to rapturous cheers from the crowd, as clearly the support for Hulkamania had started to waver. The segment, however, never aired, and the angle was scrapped. Roberts' big chance to challenge for the top belt disappeared, and despite a string of well-received angles and humongous support from fans, which would eventually lead to his acceptance into the WWE Hall of Fame, Roberts never really got close to the top title scene again. Number 6. Andre the Giant. Just to clarify, I'm not including his title reign as a result of beating Hulk Hogan at Saturday night's main event. 1. It was a screwy finish. 2. He handed the title straight over to Ted DiBiase. And 3. It was stupid. However, should Andre have had a run as champion? Opinion is divided. In storyline, the Giant was undefeated for 15 years as a babyface, and the proverbial immovable object. A title reign could have come at any time, but Andre's star was so bright, you feel he didn't really need the accolade to be seen as a major draw. That changed in 1987 when he turned heel on Hulk Hogan, which resulted in their infamous match at WrestleMania 3. People were really curious as to what was going to happen, but despite controlling 95% of the match, a clothesline, a body slam and a leg drop was all it took to end Andre's undefeated streak. It received the pop it was hoping for, and considering Andre was 41 years old at the time, when doctors had told him it was highly unlikely he would make it past the age of 40, it was probably the right decision. Perhaps given his health and his longevity with the company, they could have given Andre a short title reign as a goodwill gesture, but at the end of the day, it seems irrelevant. Whether face or heel, champion or not, Andre was one of the most recognised superstars in the world, and remains one of the most beloved in the history of the business. Number 5. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. From his debut in the AWA in 1976, through his decorated run with Jim Crockett Promotions, which saw him feud with names like Ric Flair, the Briscoe brothers and Tully Blanchard, Ricky Steamboat was well renowned as one of the best in-ring performers in the country. When he arrived at the WWF in 1985, due to his Japanese-American heritage, he was christened the Dragon, and continued to impress against the WWF's elite, such as Don Morocco and Jake Roberts. Undoubtedly Steamboat's biggest WWF moment came at WrestleMania 3, where, after several months of build-up, he won the Intercontinental title from Macho Man Randy Savage, in what became an instant Mac Classic, and would win Match of the Year in 1987. Apparently, plans were in place for a long title reign with the belt, but they were nixed when Steamboat asked for time off to be with his wife for the birth of their first child. He returned after 5 months away, but was not really pushed or given anything worthwhile story-wise, and left the company shortly after WrestleMania 4. Steamboat then had one of the most productive, high-profile years of his career in 1989 with WCW. He immediately went into a feud with Ric Flair over the NWA Heavyweight title, which led to 3 5-star classic matches, winning the title at Chi-Town Rumble, retaining in a 2 out of 3 falls match at Clash of Champions, and finally losing the belt at Wrestle War. Now everyone knew Steamboat's potential, but sadly, that potential was never realised in the WWF. Number 4. The $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. This is a difficult one. Obviously, DiBiase was a great performer, and won many heavyweight titles throughout the territory days. However, having created his own belt, the $1 Million Championship, and being a top heel in the company regardless, did he really need the belt to be seen as a real superstar? Similar to The Undertaker, who for the first 6 years of his time in the WWF never held the title except for a few days in 1991, DiBiase was able to just do his own thing, and had enough going on with the various feuds against the company's top babyfaces to not really need the title. On the other hand, imagine if, after the famous Saturday night's main event Hogan-Andre match with the two Hebners, Andre selling the belt to DiBiase was allowed to stand. Imagine watching him and Andre tormenting Hogan week after week, eventually building to a final showdown. Obviously, it would have cut into Randy Savage's first title reign, but it could have been gold. And of course, many people have stated that DiBiase was supposed to win the tournament for the vacant title at WrestleMania 4, but due to the Honky Tonk Man refusing to drop the Intercontinental title, and the company's need to have at least one babyface champion, the switch was made for Savage to beat Ted in the final. So yes, DiBiase can feel hard done by, considering he was promised the belt on his arrival, but given how his career played out, he is still regarded as a legend in the company, and worthy of his Hall of Fame induction. Number 3. Ravishing Rick Rude. One of the most legit tough guys in the business at the time, Rick Rude became one of the biggest and most successful heel performers in the WWF in the 1980s. His iconic, cocky, flamboyant, arrogant persona drove women crazy, and drove men to hate him. However, the pro arm wrestler was able to back it up with his amazing physique. Despite this, his main event record is ridiculously non-existent. After many years in Florida, World Class, and Jim Crockett Promotions, Rude arrived in the WWF in 1987 as part of Bobby Heenan's family, and had many big feuds. Part of his entrance involved goading men in the crowd and kissing women after victories. This led to a famous feud with Jake Roberts, where Rude targeted Roberts' wife Cheryl, including at one stage wearing a pair of tights with Cheryl's face on them, only for Roberts to rip them off his body. Rude would also feud with the Ultimate Warrior, first over the Intercontinental title, which Rude won at WrestleMania 5, only to lose back to the Warrior at SummerSlam, and then over Warrior's WWF title. The two faced off in a steel cage match at SummerSlam 1990. However, following this defeat, Rude left the company for WCW soon after. Rude came back to the WWF in 1997 in a non-wrestling capacity as part of DX, but would leave soon after following the Montreal Screwjob. He died 2 years later at the age of 40 from heart failure, and it remains a great shame that one of the biggest stars of his era never got more of a push to main event status, considering how much of a heat magnet he was. Number 2. The model Rick Martel. Though Martel never challenged for the WWF title, he had the tools, the storylines behind him, and potential for a proper run. After an early run with the company where he won the tag titles with Tony Garea, Martel became a huge star in the AWA, where he held the heavyweight championship for 19 months, the longest reign of the 1980s, and wrestled several matches with NWA champion Ric Flair. He returned to the company in 1986 and found more tag team success as part of the Can-Am Connection, and then alongside Tito Santana of Strikeforce, who held the tag team titles for 5 months. After some time off due to injury, Martel turned heel on Santana, walking away from his partner in the middle of a match at WrestleMania 5, and then began his singles career with his narcissistic model gimmick. He had several high-profile feuds against the likes of Shawn Michaels, Tatanka, and most famously Jake Roberts, where he blinded him with his cologne, Arrogance, leading to their blindfold match at WrestleMania 7. In the middle of the feud, Martel entered the 1991 Royal Rumble at number 6, eliminating Roberts and 3 others en route to a then record 52 minutes 17 seconds in the Rumble. However, despite this, he never received the push he clearly deserved. At times he was red hot and primed for big things, but he was cruelly underutilized, and after a short spell in WCW, he retired from wrestling in 1998. And number 1, Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. One of the best pure athletes in wrestling history, Curt Hennig was a huge part of the AWA, holding the heavyweight title for a year while feuding with both Greg and Vern Gagne. He came to WWF in 1988, following a series of amazing skits, and began a long winning streak. At the 1990 Royal Rumble, he was in the final 2 with champion Hulk Hogan, and the future seemed bright. Then suddenly, his undefeated streak fell to Brutus Beefcake at WrestleMania 6. Was this part of Hogan's backstage pull? No one will know for sure. Despite this, Perfect regrouped and won the Intercontinental title, which was well known for being a stepping stone towards the top belt, particularly following losing the title at SummerSlam it seems. Bret Hart lost the IC title at SummerSlam 1992, won the WWF title 2 months later. The Rock dropped the belt at SummerSlam 1998, won the championship tournament at Survivor Series 3 months later. Many hoped Mr. Perfect would be the blueprint for this pattern at SummerSlam 1991 by dropping the belt to Bret Hart in one of the greatest matches in both men's careers, and in SummerSlam history. Sadly, before his match with Bret, Hennig had been suffering from an injured back and was forced to take a break in in-ring competition. He would go on to manage Ric Flair upon his arrival from Atlanta, and following a spell on commentary with some wrestling thrown in, he then moved on to WCW in 1997. Hennig would return at the 2002 Royal Rumble, but was released after 3 months, and would tragically pass away a year later. And that's my list. Is there anyone you think I've missed? Who was your top pick? Let me know in the comment section, and stay tuned to the channel as next week I will look at the new generation and attitude eras for more wrestlers I feel should have won the WWF title. Remember to like and share this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell for notifications as a new video will be released every Monday, and follow me on Twitter at the handle on screen. This has been The Wrestling World according to Brad. Thanks for listening.